Web Communications Specialist here at the Carter Center. In today's presentation, we'll hear from Rogelio Lopez. He is a security incident handler for Access Now, an organization whose mission is to defend and extend the digital rights of users at risk around the world. Rogelio is going to tell us some best practices, tools, and techniques that will help safeguard your security and protect privacy on your digital devices while you travel. We look forward to welcoming you at the Human Rights Defenders Forum here in Atlanta next month, and hope this session will be helpful to you in keeping your data safe. To ask questions during the presentation, please click on the speech bubble labeled comment at the top right of your video window. That will open a window in that right-hand location, which will allow you to type in your question. We'll pass those along to Rogelio, and he will answer those as many of those as he can. Now let's get started. Welcome, Rogelio. It is all yours.
Thank you very much, Jason. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Rogelio Lopez, and like Jason said, I'm the security incident handler at the Costa Rica office for Access Now, and we run a service called the Digital Security Helpline. So in this service, what we do is we provide technical assistance for activists, journalists, human rights defenders, NGOs, whenever they have a digital security problem or digital security emergencies. So some of the recommendations that we're going to see right now are related to travel, but it's important for you to understand that these recommendations also apply in many other contexts and many other situations. So if we could move to the next slide, please. Carry a lot of sensitive information with us. We have a lot of sensitive data in our devices, like our phones, our laptops. So the first thing when we talk about digital security is that we have to ask ourselves some questions. So for example, how many devices do you have that contain sensitive information? Or how many sensitive information you have on your laptop or on your phone, for example? This sensitive information can be in many ways. It can be, for example, photos or videos that you recorded with your phone that, for example, are documenting human rights abuses. It can also be documents that you have on your hard drive in your laptop that have legal information or that have sensitive information of your clients or your beneficiaries. It can also be, for example, information that you send over email or over text message that may contain personal information or financial information and stuff like that. The next question that you want to ask yourself is, what could happen if this information fell into the wrong hands? And also, who would be interested in getting a hold of this information? What harm could they do? Also, what are you willing to do to prevent that from happening? What preventative measures can you take to stop your adversary or your enemy to gaining access to your information to cause you harm? And lastly, you can have all the strategies and all the best tools available, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be 100% safe. So what is going to be your backup plan in case these preventative measures fail? So it's important to consider that in terms of security, the more copies of the sensitive information that you have laying around, the more vulnerable it is. So reducing the number of devices that can access this sensitive material is extremely important. So we just ask you that you do your part. Next slide, please. So what we're going to talk about today are some different strategies. The first is to minimize your data. Then we're going to talk a little bit about full disk encryption, what it is and how does it work. How to use and encrypt your backups and external storage. How to use two-factor authentication for your accounts to prevent insecure access to them. How to use a password manager to create strong and unique passwords. How to use a VPN to connect safely to the network, and how to encrypt your messages. And we're going to talk a little bit also about security hygiene, like how to keep your system up to date and have a good antivirus. And also we're going to discuss, if there is time, about social engineering, which is extremely important, especially when you're traveling and when you're meeting a lot of new people. So let's move on to the next slide. The first point in the agenda is to minimize your data. So what does this mean? Like I said before, the more copies of your information that you have, the more vulnerable it is. So if you're going to travel, there is a risk that, for example, your phone or your laptop will be taken away by the border control authorities. It can be stolen. It can be, for example, illegally accessed by when you leave it at the hotel room, or it can be just lost, and then someone can find it and access your information. So the first thing you need to think about is what information are you taking with you when you travel, and what information that you actually need to take with you. Are you going to be needing those documents that you have on your laptop when you're at the forum or at any other event? Are you going to be needing access to your work accounts when you're traveling? So minimize the amount of data that you have in your devices. This can be made in different ways. For example, not bringing some devices with you. If you have a lot of information in your laptop, you may consider not taking the laptop with you or not taking your phone. You may bring what is called a clean device. What we consider a clean device is basically a laptop or a phone that has not been used for your work. So even better if it's a brand new device. But you can have, for example, an old laptop that you don't use for work and that you only use it to travel when you need to go to some risky place, and then you can use it to access your email, and you don't carry actually any of the sensitive information that you have in your regular work laptop. And lastly, you can safely delete data from your devices before you leave. This includes not only files on your hard drive, but you can also delete, for example, cookies and passwords that are stored in your browser that may leak sensitive information. The presentation contains some links to some guides and some additional information, but that presentation will be available to you at the end of the session, so don't worry about the links for now. So the point is about deleting the file securely is that when you delete a file from your computer, the operating system doesn't actually delete the information from the hard drive. If you delete a file and just leave the hard drive as it is possible to then go back and recover this information because this information is still in there. There are methods and tools that can help you actually erase this information. So when you when you delete files on your computer, then you run a cleanup and it will take all the supposedly empty space and actually make it empty instead of leaving whatever trace of all data is in there. The links contain a few guides for Windows, Mac, and Linux operating systems. But if you have questions or if you need assistance with that, you can contact us at the helpline and we can guide you through the process. Let's move to the next slide, please. The next point is the full disk encryption. So what is full disk encryption? It's a method to protect your computer and mobile phone against physical access to it. Basically, what it does is that it takes all the information that it's stored in your hard drive and encrypts it with a password. So if someone else tries to access this information, if they don't have the password, they won't be able to do it. It's important to consider some of the limitations of these technologies. For example, whenever you turn on your computer or your phone and you enter your password, that means that the data that was previously encrypted now has been decrypted and is currently live in your computer. This is by design because the operating system needs these files to be decrypted in order to work and for you to be able to use your computer. So if you're traveling and you have sensitive information in your phone or your laptop, it's a good measure to turn off your computer and make sure that full disk encryption is enabled when you pass the border or whenever you feel that you are at risk of someone physically gaining access to your computer. The reason for this is because, like I said before, it only works when it's turned off. So you turn off the laptop, you cross the border, and if they get your computer and they take it, if someone steals it, the information will be protected because there is no way to retrieve it without the decryption password. Now, if we go to the next slide, we have some information about how to actually do this in different operating systems. So, for example, the tool for Mac OS is called File Vault. This is installed by default in all MacBooks and Mac OS computers. And you just need to enable it. It will work with the same password that you use for your login, and it will make sure that your laptop is encrypted whenever it's turned off. For Windows, there is also an option like that it's the native encryption software called BitLocker. But not all versions of Windows come with this software. I think it's only the Enterprise and the Ultimate versions of Windows that come with BitLocker. So if you have, for example, Windows Home Edition, you may not find it, but there are other options like free software that you can use to encrypt a portion of your files or your entire hard drive without issues. And finally, for Linux, if you want to be really safe, you should encrypt your drive while you're installing the operating system. So the first time you get the computer, you install the operating system, you enable this encryption, and that way you will be sure that all your data will be encrypted. This same applies for smartphones. So Android, iOS, and Windows phones, they all have their own encryption methods and their own native applications. So it's different for each device, especially Android, because there are many vendors and they all have like different versions of Android OS. So you may need to do some searching before you find the right instructions for your specific device. And if you have iOS devices like iPads and iPhones, the newest ones already come encrypted by default, but it's always useful to double check that they actually are. One of the questions we had previously was that are phones and laptops the same in terms of you need to shut it down for the encryption to work? And the answer is yes. You need to have both devices turned off, because once you turn it on, you enter the password and that's loaded into the device's memory and that can be retrieved. It's not an easy task to accomplish, and it needs a sophisticated adversary to actually accomplish this. But since human rights defenders and activists and these kind of people are not your average user, they may have real adversaries that have the tools and the means and the capacities to actually do this. So that's why it's important to take this preventative measure and encrypt your devices. Also, for your phone, it's important to have a lock mechanism. So whenever you leave your phone unattended for, say, 1 minute, it should automatically lock, and it should be locked with a password or a PIN. In the case of iOS, this is easier because the same password that you use for your login is the same that you will use for the encryption software. Okay, let's move to the next slide to talk about backups. Now, you may have some information on your drive that you think is sensitive or you consider sensitive, and you don't want to take it with you. So what do you do with this information? Because you only have it in your laptop or you only have it in your phone and you don't want to lose it. So the solution is to back it up, save it somewhere safe, and just leave it home. Remove it from your computer with one of the tools that you saw earlier, and then you can be sure that the information will be safe and no one will have access to it while you travel. Now, there are some considerations to take when you create backups, when you use external storage to move your files. So having a backup is important, not only when you're traveling, but in general. If you have a lot of sensitive information, this information can be compromised, or it can be lost, it can be damaged. For example, if your computer breaks down, or if your computer is lost, or there is a natural disaster and I don't know, a tsunami comes into your office and destroys all the servers and stuff like that. So it's important to have a backup plan. You can have these backups in external hard drives or USB sticks, or you can also use, for example, cloud services, as long as you take enough precautions. And the same as the information that you have in your hard drive, it's important that these backups are properly encrypted. That way, if someone steals your USB hard drive or your USB stick that has the backup information, then they will not be able to access it because it's encrypted with a password. Any removable storage that contains sensitive information must be encrypted. If we go to the next slide, we can see the different options that we have. So we have different options depending on your operating system. You can use Mac or Windows. If you're using Linux, it may be a little more complicated and depends on the distro that you're using. So if you have questions on that, you can contact the helpline and we will be happy to assist you. Some other important consideration is that it may take a while. So encryption is a complex mathematical process. So depending on the size of your storage, it will affect the time it takes to encrypt the drive. Also, depending on how much files do you have on this hard drive or this USB stick. So it's important that you take enough time to do this and that you be patient, because the encryption can take anywhere from 30 minutes to 6 hours, depending on the data that you're trying to encrypt. Next slide, please. Now, let's talk about two-factor authentication for a little bit. Two-factor authentication, it's a technology that has been recently become more and more popular because it adds an extra step when you try to access your account. So usually what you did in the past was you had your username and password, and you access the website, you enter those credentials, and you access your information, right? You access your email, you access your social media account, your instant messaging, whatever. But what happens if your password is compromised? What happens if someone's is able to guess or get a hold of your password somehow? That means that they will have access to your information. A method to protect against this is to use two-factor authentication. So instead of just needing a password, an attacker will also require something that you have that can be like a password that's generated by your phone, or a text message that is sent to you, or a password that you have in a paper, a code, or something that you are, for example, a fingerprint. This way, if your password is compromised, the attacker will not have enough information to access your account, because they will not have this second factor. They will not have access to your phone. They will not have access to your fingerprint. We recommend, there are many different methods that you can use for two-factor authentication. You can use text messages. You can use an alternative email account. You can use generated codes that you print. You can use a device, a physical device, like a USB key. But there are advantages and disadvantages to many of these. The most common one is to use text message. But the problem with text messages is that, first of all, it's not the most secure because the protocol is not secure by design. And second, it doesn't work if you're traveling. So if you're traveling abroad and you don't have access to your phone number, then you may be locked out of your account, and that may prevent you from doing your work where you're not in your country. So in order to prevent this, you can use what is called a one-time password app. The ones that we recommend are Google Authenticator or Free OTP. And this is just an app that you install on your phone, and once you try to access your account, you enter your password, and it's going to ask you for a code that you just open the app and click on the account, and it will generate a code for you to access the account. Now, if we move to the next slide, we have there the links to set up for the most common platforms. So Google, Twitter, and Facebook. We receive many requests from these platforms or users that have problems with these platforms. So we put this information here in the slides, but there are many other services that provide this technology. For example, if you're using Dropbox, or if you're using Microsoft products, those also include two-factor authentication technologies. There's also a website that is twofactorauth.org that contains a list of many services and many platforms that also have this enabled. Again, it's important to use a one-time password app instead of your text messages for security reasons, and also because if you're traveling, it's easier and more convenient to use. Okay, let's move to the next slide, please. We have some questions that were previously sent to us, so I'm just gonna address some of them before we continue with the password managers. So, for example, the first question is, which actions do you recommend to have two-factor authentication on? So, visiting websites or visiting accounts or devices or others. The answer to that is all of them. If you have the opportunity to use two-factor authentication for websites and devices, you should use it. At least for the ones that you consider that have sensitive information or that are at some kind of risks. Another question we have is, are smartphones a liability? The answer is that they can be if you don't use them properly. But if you use them correctly, they can be a tool that help you continue your work and continue your communication. So it's important to consider the limitations, the risks, before deciding whether you should use certain device or not. But if you use them incorrectly, if you just don't set a secure enough password and you don't have encryption, then they can be a liability because you have a lot of sensitive information that can be exploited or can be stolen from the device. Okay, so about passwords. The password is the first level of protection that you have for all your online accounts and also for your devices, so your phone and your laptop. It's really important that you use a strong password, because if you use weak passwords, then that first level of protection is as good as none. You can find lists on the internet that have like the most common passwords used on websites, and you can be sure that whenever an attacker is trying to access your account, they're going to try all these passwords first because they are the most commonly used. So make sure that you are not using any of those commonly used passwords, and make sure that your passwords are strong enough. What does it mean to create a strong password? A strong password should be long. It should be at least 15 characters long. This is because short passwords are easily calculated by modern computers. So if you have a password that is 8, 5, 6 characters long, they may be too weak and it takes a computer like 3 days to decrypt it. Meanwhile, if you have a 15 to 20 characters long password, it can take a computer hundreds of years to decrypt that password. Passwords should also be robust, meaning that they are not predictable. So for example, don't use your name or your last name, your address, your phone number, stuff like that. Instead, use randomly words put together to create a phrase, or just use random characters like you are used to with the recommendations that you get from banks and stuff like that. They always ask you to put lowercase, uppercase letters, numbers, symbols, and all of that. That, of course, makes it harder to remember, but that's why we have password managers. The other thing that passwords need to be is unique. So if you use the same password for all of your accounts, only one of them needs to be compromised, and then all of them will be compromised too. So it's important that you keep one password for each of your online accounts and for each of your devices. Now, the problem with all of these rules is that, yes, those are very strong passwords and they will keep your computer secure, but how are you going to remember those? Because if you have 10 accounts and you have 3 devices, that's too many passwords to remember, especially if they all have to be 10, 15 to 20 characters long and they all have to be unique. So that's where password managers comes in. A password manager is a piece of software that lets you store, generate, and manage secure passwords. The idea is that you will install this tool in your device, and you will have to remember only one password for the tool, the master password, and that will give you access to all of your other passwords. They have many tools to, for example, generate the secure passwords. So it's a string of random characters. And you can easily update them and you can easily manage them. And it will be encrypted with the master password. So it will be secure. If someone gets a hold of your computer, they still won't be able to access this as long as your master password is strong enough. Let's go to the next slide. The software that we recommend for this, there are many options, and it's up to you to use whatever you're most comfortable with or whatever works best for your workflow. But the one that we recommend is called KeePass XC. So this is a piece of software that comes from another project called just KeePass X, but that was left behind. So this is the new iteration, and it's the most updated one. You can use the tutorial link there from a website called Security in a Box to learn about its in and outs and how it works and how to set it up. Again, remember to make a unique password for every account. Use long and complicated passwords, and try the randomly generated password that are created by KeePass or similar softwares. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now we're going to talk a little bit about VPN. So when you're traveling, you usually connect to the internet using the hotel Wi-Fi, or if you're an event, you will use the Wi-Fi that's there, or maybe you will connect at the airport, or you will use it at a cafe or restaurant or the hotel lobby, any place that offers free Wi-Fi. And these networks are great, and they allow you to connect to your work and view your email and send messages. But there is always the risk that these networks are not secure. The truth is that you don't know who configured this network. You don't know if they did it properly. You don't know if they intentionally set it up to capture information or to steal information. Or you don't know if it's just secure enough and there is a hacker sitting somewhere in the corner accessing all the information that is traveling in the Wi-Fi. So to solve this problem, you can use what is called a VPN, a virtual private network. And the way this works, it provides a secure connection to the internet by making your traffic go through a special server somewhere in the world. So from the point of the connection, the connection will look like it comes from some other network instead of your own network. And all the data that you send and receive is encrypted and safe from surveillance. So if you're on an open Wi-Fi that doesn't have a password, you can use the VPN to encrypt this communication and make sure that none of your data can be taken while it's in the air. So again, always use it in public, unknown or untrusted Wi-Fi. This is especially important when you're traveling. You can use it on your phone, you can use it on your laptop, you can use it on any internet ready device. And you may also consider turning on your VPN on all time if you wish so. This may depend on your threat model and the work that you do. But for example, if you're sharing an office and you have access to a shared Wi-Fi, you might consider using a VPN while you work in this office. Or you may choose to use it on your phone all the time when you connect to the cellular network to prevent monitoring. Or you may use it for another reason. For example, if some content or website is blocked in your country by the authorities, you can use a VPN so your traffic looks like it comes from a different country and bypass that censorship. We have a question about using VPN. So it says, is using a VPN something that security services might be aware of? Using a VPN might be suspicious? The answer is yes and no. It depends on the kind of VPN that you use. Some of them can be identifiable, for example, by the type of traffic. So the authorities or law enforcement may have access to the connections, and they may have access to this data and determine what kind of VPN are you using. Some of them are more secure in terms of they mask the traffic to look like regular internet traffic, internet encrypted traffic, HTTPS. And that way it's harder to identify. In any case, the best option is that if the most people that use VPN, the most people that use encryption, the safer it is for everybody else. Because if only the people that need to use encryption are using it, then they become very easy to identify, because the authorities only need to look at the traffic and say, okay, this one is encrypted, and I go after this person. If everybody is using encrypted communications, that means that it will be harder to spot which traffic is it's offending or it's illegitimate or whatever it is that they are considering it for. And let's remember that using a VPN is basically encrypting your communication, your internet traffic. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Now, let's continue about talking about encryption. So you can encrypt your communications, you can encrypt your internet connection so it cannot be monitored, but you can also encrypt the messages that you send themselves with email encryption. Email encryption, it's a very strong tool, and it's been very useful for many activists and human rights defenders all over the world. And the idea is that it encrypts the message. It's what it's called end-to-end encryption. So it encrypts the message before it leaves your computer with a key that is stored only on your device. And then while it travels the internet, it's encrypted. And it can only be decrypted when it gets to the destination device and they have the decryption key to view the message. One of the questions that we have is, can ISPs view the content of these encrypted messages? Can law enforcement view the content of these messages? To answer that, it's important to understand that there are different levels of encryption that you can use when you communicate. So for example, just by using HTTPS when you connect to your Gmail account or your Yahoo account, for example, that will encrypt the connection between you and the Gmail server or the Yahoo server. That means that if someone is trying to get this data while it's in transit, be your ISP or the authorities somehow, if they can intercept the traffic, they will not be able to see the content of this traffic because it's encrypted. However, the messages are not encrypted themselves, so they sit on the server, on the Gmail server, on the Yahoo server, unencrypted. That means that Google and Yahoo will have access to that data, be it because the system administrator is snooping around and looking at your communications, or what they usually do is they have software that automatically scans your email for keywords to give you then advertisement about the things that you care about or that you're interested in. That also means that in some contexts, law enforcement can force these companies, legally force them to provide this information. So the government can go to Google and tell them, we are after this user and we want to see the emails that they sent between this and that date. This is something that has happened and that can happen. So how do you protect against that? PGP encryption or email encryption in general, end-to-end encryption, that's what it does. It makes it so that while the email or the message is traveling through the network and while it's sitting on the email servers, it's properly encrypted, and it can only be decrypted by the person that has the decryption key, which in the best case scenario would be only the recipient of these messages, right? Now, some of the questions that we have about email encryption is that what happens, for example, if I send an encrypted email and the other person doesn't have enough protection? Can the conversation be compromised on their end? And the answer is yes. If they have the decryption key and they decrypt the message and their computer is vulnerable because they have malware or because they are not locking the computer when they leave it alone, or they don't have full disk encryption and they just leave it in a hotel room, then this information can be compromised. It's important that both ends of the conversation take the appropriate measures to protect this data. So the answer is that this information is only protected while it's moving in transit. Once it gets to the device and it's decrypted, it's vulnerable as any other file that it's on your computer. Another question that we have is that if you email someone an encrypted email, will the whole thread be protected, or can the conversation on their end be compromised? So the encryption applies to the message that you're sending. So whether that message contains the entire thread or only your answer to that thread, that's what will be encrypted. If there are previous versions of this conversation that were not encrypted, previous messages that were not encrypted, then they are definitely not encrypted, and then can be seen by the server administrators, or perhaps by someone eavesdropping on the communication. Another question that we have that relates to this is, what is the safest method to send sensitive information? The safest method is to use strong encryption and to use it properly. So the strongest that we can use right now is with email, it's PGP encryption. And as long as you use it properly and you keep your encryption keys secure, you can be sure that only you and the recipient of the message can see that information. So let's move to the next slide. On the previous slide, we had the links to install email encryption for Windows and Mac computers, but what about text messages? Sometimes you don't have access to your email, or you don't have access to your computer, because one of the drawbacks of PGP is that you can only use it on the computers or the devices that have the decryption keys, and the recommendation is to have that only in one place. Because like I said before, the more copies that you have of it, the more vulnerable it becomes. So let's imagine that you have configured PGP on your laptop, you created your encryption keys, and you store them securely because your hard drive is encrypted too, and you're traveling and you decide you don't want to take your laptop. How do you send information back to your colleagues or to your clients if you don't have access to PGP encryption? Well, you decide to use your phone, and you decide to send text messages. There are several services that offer encrypted messages, end-to-end encrypted messages. For example, WhatsApp and Telegram do this. But these tools, because of the business model that they use and the practices that they have of collecting metadata and some other stuff, they are not the best option. The one that we recommend is called Signal, and this is an app that was created by Open Whisper Systems, and it's all open source. It's free to use, and they don't collect any information about their users except for the phone number and the last time you log in. So it's the best option to have if you need to send encrypted messages quickly. This will be, of course, short messages and text messages. They also offer now voice messages as well, just like WhatsApp does. And whenever you're traveling, it's a good option because it also consumes little data. Be sure to use Signal for your private mobile conversations and during emergencies. For example, if you need to text your manager or your emergency contacts, it's better to do it over Signal in order to not reveal any sensitive information. Another thing about Signal is that it offers voice calls. They work over the internet, so they may not work all the time or in every network, but it is a good option, and they are also end-to-end encrypted, so you don't need to worry about your communications being eavesdropped by your adversaries. Let's go back to let's go to the next slide. So the previous point relates to what's the safest method of sending sensitive information. So we said that email is the best one because the technology is more advanced and more mature, but Signal would be the second best to that. Now, you can have all the tools, all the best tools for communication. You have your email encryption, and you have your full disk encryption and your two-factor authentication, and you took care of all that. Does that mean that you are secure now and that you don't need to worry about anything else? The answer is no. Security is not an end, it's a process. So it's constantly checking, analyzing your risk and assessing your threats and considering what could go wrong or what we should be protecting. So there are some security hygiene techniques that we should be implementing all the time, whether you are in a sensitive environment or not. So, for example, always make sure your software is up to date, including your operating system, your browser, all your programs that you use. One example of this, of why this is important, is that a couple of weeks ago, well, actually more like about, there was a vulnerability that was discovered with the email encryption that we mentioned before with PGP, where encryption that will leak the sensitive information. This has been fixed, and it's already implemented in the most recent version of the tools, the most popular tools, but there are still many people that are using the old version and that remain vulnerable. So if you have the security tools but you don't keep them up to date, you might be exposing information, because there's always new security holes that are found, always new vulnerabilities that are being exploited, because in the end, the software is not perfect. It was made by humans, and humans make mistakes. So it's always a possibility that they will be compromised. So it's important to keep it up to date. If you have the option, it's better to have the automatic updates enabled. So you make sure that whenever an update is available, you will get it instantly. Another advice is never plug an unrecognized or a stranger USB into your computer, because you don't know what these devices have. They may contain malware, they may contain malicious scripts that steal your information, or they may contain viruses that spread over your network. So it's always important to consider, why would you put this strange USB key into your laptop? That same applies, for example, to mobile phones. Sometimes people are used to charging their phones via USB. So maybe you have a USB port at the airport and you connect your phone to it to charge it, or maybe you can connect your phone to somebody else's computer while it's charging. That's not safe, because you don't know what's on the other side of that connection. You don't know if you're connecting this to a malicious port that will access your information. You don't know if the person has a virus in their computer that can infect you if you let them connect their device, or if you are the laptop owner and someone is asking you for a USB port to charge their phone, you don't know what their phone has. There are devices that can protect you against it. That basically, it's a USB port that blocks all the data transfer and all data communications for the port, and it only allows for charging. But still, the recommendation is to just avoid that. If you need to charge your phone, just use a regular wall plug instead of USB, and don't use any strange USB devices on your computer. Beware of what you click or what you download. Some malicious websites may intentionally or unintentionally distribute malware. For example, when you click on an ad or a pop-up window on a website, that may infect your computer. If you received an email that says, please download this attachment, that may be a malicious file, or they may ask you to click on a link that would take you to a fake website that steals your information, many things. So be aware of what you're doing. Make sure that when you are visiting a website, you are in the actual website that you want to visit, especially if you're following some links instead of going directly to the website. In that same note, when you're browsing the internet, you can consider installing privacy and security browser extensions. In the presentations I mentioned too, which are Privacy Badger. Privacy Badger is a tool developed by EFF, and what it does is that it blocks all these trackers online that steal your information, or blocks malicious cookies, or Facebook tracking for advertisement purposes, stuff like that. So it may protect you against some automatic attacks that go on websites. And HTTPS Everywhere is another extension also developed by EFF. And what it does is that it makes sure that your connection, when you're visiting a website, it makes sure that the connection is encrypted when possible. So whenever you visit an HTTPS website, you get a little lock icon on your browser that tells you that they can. With this extension, you don't have to worry about that because it will make sure that the connection is encrypted whenever it is possible. Also, if you have an antivirus software on your computer or on your phone, use it. It's not a cure for everything, and it will not stop the most sophisticated or targeted attacks, but it will prevent the most common threats, and it will keep you safe from all the commercial malware that's out there. And when you have it, it's not enough to just install it and forget about it forever. You have to make sure that it's up to date. Not only the software, but the virus database needs to be updated constantly, so it knows what to look for. And it's important to run it once in a while to make sure that your files are not compromised or are not infected with any malicious software. A rule of thumb is you can do it once every 3 months. Just run your antivirus and update your passwords. Also, you may consider using a more secure, quote-unquote, operating system like Mac OS or Linux over Windows. The problem Windows is not that it's insecure. The problem with Windows is that it's the most popular operating system for desktops. So all the commercial malware and all the viruses and all the vulnerabilities are exploited in Windows before everywhere else. So by moving to a less popular operating system like Linux, you can keep yourself safe from these threats. Now, that doesn't mean that just because you have Linux on your laptop, you are 100% secure and you should forget about it. Again, it's nothing is 100% secure. So even if you have a Linux computer, if your adversary is sophisticated enough, they might develop malware specifically for you and specifically for your computer. So it's always important to watch out for your behaviors and your activities online and offline. And lastly, stay aware. If you're going to be traveling, you're going to be meeting a lot of new people. You're going to be visiting new places that you don't know. You might be visiting new websites. You might be connecting to a strange network. So stay aware. Be careful of what you do and how do you handle your sensitive information. Let's go to the next slide. Because now we're going to talk a little bit. Okay, those were all the recommendations from the technical point of view. So the tools that you can install on your device to protect your information from technical attacks. So just to recap, we can use full disk encryption to protect the information that is in your device. We can use end-to-end encryption on email and messages to protect the information that is traveling on the web. You can use browser extensions like Privacy Badger and HTTPS everywhere to protect your internet connection and your browsing habits. You can use VPN to protect your connection when you're using an unknown network or unsafe network. And all these technologies help you stay safe against these technological attacks. But the truth is that the most common type of attacks are against the humans themselves. That's what it's called, social engineering. Social engineering is an attack that relies on human interaction to gain access to either private information or, for example, financial records, passwords, social security numbers, and such. And in these cases, an attacker will exploit, for example, your sympathy, your hate, your adherence to routine, or any other emotion that can help them gain your confidence quickly or make you enter in a state of mind that will make you do actions that you wouldn't normally do. For example, creating a sense of panic if you receive an email that has this big security alert saying that your account is compromised and your bank account is being depleted, and you need to enter some website and put your password in it. That's made intentionally so that you panic and then you don't think about the things that you're doing. So social engineers may use the phone, for example, pretending to be a friend or pretending to be a service that you trust. They can also use email, pretending to be your bank or social media accounts or tech support or even your friends if they manage to spoof the email address. And also common is that they approach you in person. So especially when you're traveling, someone may contact you with some interesting or cool idea, and then they become very interested in your work and start making a lot of questions, like sensitive questions, like what's your work schedule, or related to the information that you handle or the infrastructure, to get all this information out of you. So we're going to see all these three methods in more detail. Let's move to the next slide to talk about social engineering by email. This is very common. This is widespread over spam emails on the internet. You may have seen these messages yourself. For example, an email that looks like it's from a bank that has a message saying that they're making changes to the website, so please confirm your credentials by entering this link. This may be it looks like a legitimate email, but it actually comes from a malicious third party, and the link that you're clicking is not actually a link to your bank website, but it's actually a link to a malicious website that will just get your login, your username and password, and then they will have access to this bank information. This applies not only to bank information, but you can receive this email saying, for example, some internal tool that you use at your work, and some internal system that needs a password, that you will receive an email pretending to be your system administrator, telling you to update your password, stuff like that. So there are many.
Hey everyone, it looks like we've lost the audio from Rogelio right now, and in the event that he's not able to come back, we might just wrap it up. But be patient for one moment, and we're trying to get him back. Hi Rogelio, you there?
Hey,
Okay, you're back.
I'm sorry. I don't know what happened with my connection.
Sure. So yeah, if you would just want to carry on with this slide, we can go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly where you lost me, so I'm just gonna start from the top on this slide, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so I was saying that social engineering can occur via different methods. So the most common one that you may have seen from spam emails and such are by email. So for example, you may receive an email that looks exactly like the emails you have received in the past from your bank, but this one says something along the lines of, we're making some changes to our website, please confirm your credentials by clicking on this link and then enter your username and password. This may be a malicious message that doesn't take you to the original bank website, but it takes you to a malicious website that it's meant to steal your information. So you will put your username and password into a fake website, and then you just gave that away to your attacker that now has access to your information. In order to prevent this, it's just a matter of paying attention. So instead of just clicking the link that you received on the email, go to your bank website manually. Just open a new browser window and type the URL, and then check if this information is actually true. Another example is if, for example, you receive an email from a friend or a colleague, or, for example, your system administrator, and it says something along the lines of, "Hey, can you help me with this document or this presentation?" And it contains an attachment, a file. The email may look like it actually comes from your friend or your colleague. The email address may look exactly like theirs, but that doesn't mean that the email is legitimate. It can be, for example, that they are spoofing the email address with some advanced tools, or that your friend's email was compromised and they have access to it, and now they're using their account to try to get to you. And if you receive an email saying that, hey, please look at this attachment, you should be wary of that. You should consider if that person would normally send you these kind of emails, and if you should just download it and open it or not. So if you have an antivirus, you might be tempted to just check it, but if this is an advanced attack or a more sophisticated attack, your antivirus may not detect any issues with it. So let's go to the next slide, please. If the email contains a link, an attachment, or a request for private information, you have to treat it cautiously. You have to, if you receive unsolicited, unexpected link or attachment, it looks legitimate by a second. It's important for you to double check this with your contacts. So for example, if the email comes from someone that you know, you may reach out to them over the phone or send in a text message saying, hey, did you actually send me this email? Did you actually send me this attachment? What is it? To confirm, because they may be aware of it and they may confirm that they sent it, or they may be worried about it and tell you, no, I didn't send you anything, and maybe my account is compromised. Same with email links. If you receive something like that from your bank, it's better to go to your bank website and see if there is any news about these changes or any information, or perhaps a phone number that you can contact to verify this information. And make sure that you take these measures even if the email seems to be coming from someone that you know, because like I said before, the email address can be spoofed, or your friend's account can be compromised. Another thing that you can do to protect your emails and to let people know that that the emails are legitimate is that you can use cryptography, like email encryption, PGP encryption that we talked about before. You can use it to sign your emails. That way, your coworkers or your friends they have a way to verify that this email actually came from you, because only you should have the encryption keys to sign these messages. And that way you can build this trust among your colleagues about when you can open or should not open any attachments or links. And in the end, it's about being aware and taking precautions. If an email feels odd to you, it's better to report it. You can report it to your local system administrator, to the person who manages your email accounts at work. And if you don't have any of those, you can contact us at Access Now. You can reach out to the helpline and say, hey, I received this email. I don't know if it's malicious or not. Can you check it for me? And we'll be happy to do so. Let's move on to the next slide. Now, social engineering can also occur over the phone. So social engineer may call you on the phone, and they may create this sense of urgency to get you to assist. So they may tell you, hey, this is your friend from work, and I'm stuck at the airport, and I'm supposed to be boarding right now, and I left my password to my email. Can you help me out? Or someone may call you pretending to be from a trusted service, like for example, your internet provider. They may call you to ask you to do some things with your account or your network at home or at the office to make some changes. You should be aware of those as well, because this is something that we have observed in some occasions. They also may have a legitimate request or something that sounds like a legitimate request by exploiting your adherence to your routine. So, for example, you may get a call from someone saying, hey, this is Carol from your bank, and we've seen some fraud on other accounts, and we would like to confirm some information with you, and they will start asking you questions over the phone. If we go to the next slide, we can see the advice on how to prevent this. So always verify the caller. If it's someone that you know, you can hang up and then call them back on the phone number that you had before, because you may receive a phone call from a number you don't know saying, hey, this is your friend Bob. Well, let's go ahead and call Bob on the old number and see if he responds, to see if the call was legitimate. Another option is to call someone else, call a third party, a third friend, and ask them if the situation is true. You can also use encrypted communications for this. You can use either Signal or an email to send to this person to verify that this information is actually true. And if you have questions, if you don't feel comfortable about it, you can simply refuse the request until you can verify their identity. You should know, or at least you should have some policy in your work saying that you, your coworkers and your managers should not request any private information or any access to accounts over the phone without verifying in a second way. If you have these security measures implemented, then a coworker, a legitimate request, they will understand your concerns and they will, be sensible about it. If people refuse to hear no from for an answer, or they refuse to be called back, or they are suspicious about your skepticism, or they try to make you feel uncomfortable, or they try to make you feel guilty for doubting them, you should treat that as a red flag, because those are techniques to make you not think about it, to make you feel bad, or to make you feel urged to take action, and they are intentionally done like that. Someone that has a legitimate request, they will understand if you have concerns, and they will understand that it's sensitive and should not bother you if you want to verify that information. And last but not least, never click on a link or visit a website as directed by the caller. So if someone is telling you, hey, can you go to this website and update your information, don't do that. It's better to confirm some before that the caller is a legitimate person and they are doing legitimate work instead of just blindly following these instructions. And let's move to the next slide to talk about impersonation, because this is the most dangerous one when you're traveling. Because when you go to the forum next month or any other event that you attend, you will be meeting a lot of new people. You will be exchanging a lot of personal information like business cards, and people will be talking about the work they do and talking about their situations and their risks, and maybe mentioning information about their colleagues and their protocols and stuff like that. So it's a lot of valuable information that can be extracted from someone just by talking. It's also important to consider that at this event, sometimes people go out and they go to the official event party or dinner, and they have a few drinks, and then it's more likely that they will reveal sensitive information. So also it's important to be careful about that. So sometimes a social engineer will attempt to compromise your information or your organization by doing it in person. So impersonating can work in many ways. You can be at an event and someone attending the event can approach you saying, hey, I work in similar things that you do, and I heard you're talking about this and this, and I wanted to ask some questions. And they will start asking questions like personal questions, or more about the information that you handle, or how is it handled, or where is the information stored. And you should be suspicious about those questions. If someone is too eager to ask you this personal or sensitive information, you should be free to tell them that you're either not comfortable sharing with it with them, or just don't answer the questions. Another example is that social engineer may choose to appear as someone that elicits sympathy. So, for example, a pregnant woman or an old person, or sometimes they even use children, or someone who blends into the background, for example, a UPS delivery guy, or someone dressed up as a construction worker, or pretending to be tech support to get close to you, get close to your hardware. They all may pretend to be a building inspector to wander in a property and find the weak spots or the security exits, stuff like that. So it's always important to be clear that it's okay to ask yourself, why is this person here? What are they doing? Do they need access to this and that? Should they have this information? And don't be afraid to ask them directly these questions, like, what are you doing here? Can you show me your credentials? If they say that they are from some company, then they should have some sort of identification. And again, if they get offended by these questions, that should be treated as a red flag. Someone that it's willing to cooperate with you or to work with you, they would understand that this information is sensitive and you are not comfortable sharing it without verifying their identity first. So if they get offended or try to make you feel guilty or try to rush you into giving this information away, be aware of that. Be suspicious and be skeptical. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is a lot of information to process. It's a lot of advice. It's a lot of things that you may need to do before traveling. Luckily, you have plenty of time still. But like I said at the beginning, the helpline is a service that provides this kind of support for activists and journalists and human rights defenders. So if you have any questions, if you have concerns, if something doesn't feel right, if you feel like you need more or that you would like to have some personal assessment of your risks and your threats, you can reach out to us. You can contact us at this email address, help@accessnow.org, or you can also contact me directly on my personal email. That's rogelio@accessnow.org. That's at the end of the slides. And we'd be happy to assist. Don't be afraid that we are going to tell you that you're wrong or that you're doing things the wrong way. The sooner that you get help, the sooner that we can help, that we can assist you. So it doesn't matter if you think you made a mistake or it's something that it's easy but you don't know how to do it. That doesn't matter. Just reach out to us and we'll be happily help you set up your email encryption, your full disk encryption, and implementing all these measures that we talked about today. Also, if you're going to the forum next month, I and my colleague will be there. We will have a workshop on digital security for the people that are interested. We'll cover some of these topics and some other techniques more related to your general work, not specifically about traveling. And then we will also have a space that we call the Digital Security Clinic, where we will be available for you to reach out to us with questions, or perhaps you want to bring your device, you want to bring your laptop to set up full disk encryption on the spot, or to set up encrypted communications, or you have any questions about specific tools that you use in your workflow. I will be there available for you to reach out to me in person and ask these questions. And we will provide this assistance in different languages. So we will have availability for English, Spanish, French, and Arabic. So don't be afraid to reach out to us. Let's go to the next slide. We have some additional resources that you may want to look at that have some additional information about how to travel and how to securely cross borders. So the first link that you have there, it's the guide that we had in 2017 for our own internal travel. This is something that we put out for our conference RightsCon, and it contains the same information that we talked about here, but maybe with more details and more dig into the tools. Then you have the EFF border crossing guide that's specific to the US. So it talks about the different controls and the security controls that you go through when you enter the US or when you go out, and which points your devices can be seized or taken away. So it's important to check that whenever you're traveling to the US, which is the case for the forum next month. Then you also have, also by EFF, the Surveillance Self-Defense Guide. This also contains some sections on secure travel, but it contains also a lot of information on how to protect your information from mass surveillance. We have a digital first aid kit, which is a bunch of tools and recommendations for digital security. So the idea is that you enter this website and you select your concerns or the things that you want to protect, and they will give you recommendations for different tools and techniques that you can implement. And last is the security in a box guide, which is a lot of documentation on how to use different tools and different techniques to protect your information both online and offline, and also include some information about physical security and how to, for example, if you're attending protests and or documenting human rights violations and stuff like that, that you need to go on the ground. They have advice for that stuff. And we can move to the next slide, which is the last one that contains my contact information. There you have my Twitter handle if you want to reach out over Twitter. You have my email if you have any questions related to digital security or about the presentation, or if you want to schedule an appointment for the clinic that we're going to have during the event, you can reach out to me over email. And you also have there my PGP fingerprint, which is the identificator for my key. So if you want to send me an encrypted email, or you want to establish a secure channel of communication, you can use this PGP key to reach out to me. So thank you very much. That was the presentation. If you have any questions, I believe you can type them in the chat and I will be able to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Rogelio. That was very informative, and it seems like I might have some work to do myself. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. We appreciate your time today. That was really, really great. And thank you, everyone, for your questions. We look forward to talking with you more as you arrive at the Defenders Forum next month. And as Rogelio said, we will make this presentation available to you all. For more about Access Now, please visit accessnow.org. And we also encourage you to join the Forum on Women, Religion, Violence, and Power. That's where we hope you can engage and collaborate with other human rights defenders around the world. You can browse the site and find media resources, including this one, and sign up for a membership at forum.cartercenter.org. And that's all for today. Safe travels, everyone, and we will see you soon. And thank you for attending today. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jason. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.